so here we are going live. We're on the Great Lawn. How's my exposure? We've got a hard light out there today, so once again, I'm trying to kind of get. I'm in the shadows. Okay. Well, as the sun goes down, maybe it will come into a nice kind of balance. Yeah. So I just want to talk about my week. All the crazy. I mean, I had 5 days in a row, which is rare for me. When I did this open mic at the Quincy Atom on Saturday in Bed-Stuy, that was super fun, hosted by Ann Van Amps. It was a lot of fun. I think I scared everybody. I thought I was hilarious, but I did a lot of my material about porn, which kind of scares. I don't know. Who cares at this point? I thought I was hilarious. Sunday was the Pathetic Happening. I'm going to talk about that. It was a cool event at the Poetry Project with a lot of simultaneous. It was like the church became the book and just flew away. Monday was the open mic. It was a fun show. I got paid, which was nice. Tuesday was Unnameable reading a Motley Quartet with the great Philip Ashley and Kelsa Traum, who was amazing as well. That was a super fun reading at Unnameable Books in Bed-Stuy. Ooh, I've got some flyers. I got to hang up some flyers. I've been hanging up flyers kind of throughout the city, and perhaps you've seen them. I hit up Times Square yesterday. So then yesterday was the final a 5-day streak of activities and work for me. I had to shoot a talk at an art gallery, so I was busting my ass trying to make money. This is just my live journal, you know. We're just warming up here. I haven't been live in a while. I've been so busy, you know, with working and things. But my phone is falling apart. The battery's dying. I don't even know how long this will last. It loses like 10%, like every 5 minutes. But I want to start by talking about the Unnameable reading because, to be honest, what sucks is I had my tripod, I had my camera, I was going to film it and everything, and right before I went up, I set up my kind of, iPhone tripod and the chair in front of me, and I thought I pressed record and then went up, to do my thing. But when I got back to my seat, I checked it, and what happened was I double-tapped the record button. So I have about a fraction of a second of Philip introducing me and none of my reading, which sucks because I filmed basically everything. And it was probably my favorite reading maybe that I've ever done. I do think it was kind of a breakthrough, even though, I think I offended the audience. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, if you look like punk rock, right? Or even rock and roll, and maybe this is an antiquated, maybe we shouldn't do it this way because they did it this way, but, the goal was to piss off the audience. Now everybody's so afraid of offending anybody, and it's the worst thing you can possibly do. That was their goal, it seemed like, 50 years ago or whatever. I'm not exactly sure why, but I got the idea because it was 15-minute reading. I had done Unnameable 2 weeks exactly to the day prior at the roulette series, which I thought went well. The chance operation I thought did come out with kind of a cool reading, a cool combination of things. And so I felt like I didn't feel that much pressure at this reading. I felt like, okay, it's Ashley, it's Philip. They're my friends. I love them. I feel comfortable. I just read it this, I'd already been at Unnameable. It's a big deal. It is the spot in Brooklyn. If you're a Brooklyn or a New York City poetry fan, Unnameable is pretty much the spot. You can go there any night of the week and see phenomenal stuff. And it's an institution at this point. They're just doing the best programming in the city. And it's an honor to read there, you know. I mean, my whole thing in life is gigs. I love doing gigs. I love playing gigs. I love doing shows. Probably a lot of my friends in New York, that's why we're here. They might feel the same way. Like, book me on stuff. I love doing stuff. That's, even though this spring has been kind of long and cold and like, you know, I've been sleeping on a balloon basically for the past 3 months. Um, I have been doing a lot of shows, which is the only thing that matters. It's like being on tour, you know, in your own living room or your own city. Uh, you know, I've been doing comedy stuff that I've gotten booked on. You know, in addition to open mics and things like the Quincy Adam thing. Of course, the open mic I host is a big part of it. It's kind of the, you know, the central hub of my kind of laboratory or whatever. But I did that people reading funny things reading. That was super fun at Black Spring Books. The great book backyard bookstores of Brooklyn. You know, and going back and forth kind of between the comedy and the poetry kind of modes and sort of overlapping and, you know, having them influence each other, having them kind of taking things from one other, maybe applying it to the other, and vice versa. Getting to know people in both scenes, it kind of relieves the pressure a little bit. Um, and it just kind of feels like a natural fit. So anyway, you know, I got the idea in my head, like, I'm just going to read my diary. I've got 15 minutes, you know, like, I've done a couple of features of that length, so, like, you know, to be honest, I don't really like, 15 minutes is not that long of a window. Putting together a bunch of little things, that's what you know, the first time I did a feature last year at Shades of Green, that's what I did. I read kind of a bunch of different little pieces. I think I read one long piece and like a bunch of little pieces. I don't necessarily like stopping and starting for applause or, you know, stopping and starting poems. I thought I've got 15 minutes. What I want to do is just sort of like do a drone. I want to do like kind of a sound bath. I want to just go the whole way through like I do in my videos. Like I wanted it to be, because I had a nice chunk of time. To be honest, I think my best writing or like my form is these long videos where like my poems are like an hour and a half long or something, you know, where it's just like I literally read my entire sort of long form notebook over the video. If you watch like my Shenmue video or all my videos from last summer, I was just literally reading like my entire, I publish everything I write, like I say, and you know, publishing it via the video. You know, my goal doing these open mics and performances is to sort of create an archipelago where I read my entire diary, where I read everything I write. I mean, it is meticulously chosen. I don't just write anything down. I sort of edit in advance. I pre-edit, or at least that's what I tell myself. But so I just thought, I've got 15 minutes. Let me just try that. Let me just read fucking for 15 minutes. Let me just find a part of my diary that's like 15 minutes long. I'll just read that. I'll just go straight through, and that'll be like a good chunk of the book or whatever. How you doing? Hey man, how are you? Oh, somebody else. Okay. Okay. This guy, I thought this guy was waving at me. He's like looking kind of right. He's got mirror shades on, so I thought he was looking at me. So I thought, yeah, I'll just, you know, I always read kind of like, you know, typical, almost every poetry reading I do is an open mic, to be honest. It's only recently I've been getting booked on stuff. So it's sort of coming out of the pandemic and coming out of this or that and having kind of more visibility maybe through the Easy Paradise thing. Now people kind of, you know, have a reason to book me, or, you know, they're more familiar maybe with my performance style or whatever, my body of work. I can use the open mic to sort of push my my corpus on people. Just kidding. It's a gym, it's a weight room. Uh, but it's also a great place to work. I want to encourage people at the open mic to like write there, work. Peter Glissman was telling me he's written more of his act at the Easy Paradise open mic than anywhere. He'll just sit, you're waiting for your turn to go. You're waiting an hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, whatever. You can just draw, write poetry, film it. It's an invitation to be creative. You don't just have to sit there. You can work. These people are walking around my live stream. That's cool. Or their mom, I guess, was in it. The younger people saw what I was doing. The older lady didn't see it. Or maybe that's just my kind of prejudgmental way of cognating it. Yeah, so this unnameable reading, I just thought, let me just pick, so like these open mics, you typically get 3 minutes or whatever, 2 minutes, very short amount of time. So it's like you're reading one poem from the diary or whatever. So with this, I just thought, let me just experiment, as always. And like I said, I don't know, for whatever reason, I feel like a lot of times those are my most effective. Those long pieces are just, you can, beginnings and endings, it's not like they're hard, but like you do have to like make them happen. And like, I don't want to have just like a bunch of poems that are like 2 pages long or half a page long or whatever. I want poems of all sizes and shapes. And, you rarely get the opportunity to share something long in public. And I wanted, I've been doing kind of comedy stuff and been able to get that out of my system. I wanted to do something that was a little more serious and a little bit more. I wanted to try something that was like a little more drone and a little bit more kind of people having to focus in. And like with the videos, what I find is by just like kind of throwing the text out there in sort of like a level, kind of legible recitation rather than like emphatic and emotional and all over the place, herky-jerky, temperamental. Just let the words hit their ears and let them actually just hear it like they're just reading it. Give them the most objective kind of delivery. That's what I was sort of trying to do. I wasn't. Plus, with the long piece, I don't think I really could have just been method acting the whole time. It would have taken forever to read that piece. Like, you do kind of have to read it fast, because it was like, I counted it the night before, it was like 24 pages of it's a smaller diary, but, it's still, I figured it would last probably about 15 minutes. Probably not. But as I was up there reading, I was like, Jesus Christ, is this going to... I thought I had like a lot more ahead of me, and I'm like, oh my God, this is taking way longer. But I thought it went well. There are definitely lines in the poem that are... And, I didn't really think about this at the time because I've been spending so much time in comedy world. And like, to be honest, there's nothing in the poem that if you said it at a comedy open mic, people wouldn't even bat an eye. They'd be like, oh yeah, come on my face, daddy, sure. That's a fair, that's not, you're going to hear stuff that's 100 times more offensive at any comedy open mic. So I'm sort of half sensitized to that in a way. Whereas, Unnameable Books in Brooklyn is not necessarily that tough. It's a safe space. It's more of that kind of attitude, which is fine. But I wasn't trying to sugarcoat anything or censor anything. I literally read every single word. Fred Moten said this amazing thing at his reading the week before. That was Wednesday, a couple days before the Quincy Adam thing. And he said, just because it's on the page, you don't have to read it. And you can also say stuff that isn't on the page. Just hearing Fred Moten kind of give that permission really helped a lot. But I did read everything that was on the page, and I didn't ad lib. A lot of times I'll go off script and kind of that my tangents can kind of get potheady, and I don't know. On stage it can be harder to pay that stuff off because you feel pressure of people watching you and things. Rather than focusing on what you should be thinking about and what you should be communicating and articulating. So I don't know. To be honest, I didn't read it that many times before I read it out loud. I kind of just looked through it. Usually with readings, when I choose what I'm going to read, I sort of will pick up my notebook and I'll just go through and I'll look for things that connect to the setting of where I am generally. I want to say things that feel pertinent to my life and that feel like things I just want to say out loud. That's really all my poems are. They're just scripts for like shit I want to say out loud. And things I want to remember to say, how I want to say them. They're lines from other stuff that I find fun to say. Like in this poem, I have a line from the British Office. I don't agree with that in the workplace. It's just something that I enjoy saying. I think it's funny. And it's also relevant to modern kind of workplace. It's a satire, right, of... Well, okay, so the piece I read, there were a few pauses in it. There's a few, I didn't read any of the dates, which I typically do. But yeah, when I'm choosing something to read, I'm looking for kind of connections to the space, connections to the time. I always read different things at every single reading, and I only read recent things from my diary, basically. So usually there are resonances. Like with this piece, there were people that were there was a lot of people referred to in the poem because it's a longer thing, including Martyr, who was in attendance, Luke Hall, who was also in attendance. It was another reason why I wasn't nervous, because I didn't think anybody was going to show up. The roulette, no, and that's typical for poetry stuff, really. I don't mean that in any kind of disparaging way. It's just like the roulette thing we did a couple weeks before, there weren't that many people there. There was maybe 10 or 12 people there. So I just thought, it's a poetry reading. It's a Tuesday night. No one, if nobody shows up to this, I'm not going to get all bent out of shape getting nervous about it. Like, I've done enough of these that, I wasn't nervous, really. I just thought I'm going to get up and do what I'm going to do, and either people are going to like it. I'm going to try to do like a hypnosis by having sort of a longer, sustained thing where I don't pause and explain shit. I'm just going to read all the way through. I'm going to try to hypnotize the group into some kind of wavelength or something, brainwave, which, I don't think I got I think I kind of got there, and I kind of didn't. It was funny because one of the great things about reading at Unnameable is there's all these birds, because there's trees right there, It's in a backyard, so it's gorgeous, and it's like there's all these birds, so there's really a lot of kind of scissoring bird songs and tweets and whatnot. And so that, you're kind of competing for that airspace when you're reading. And the poet who went on after me remarked that the birds had been quieted by my reading. Whatever. So I do think I hypnotized the birds anyway. They heard my loud ass and they shut the fuck up. I guess. I don't know what that means. Maybe they were scared. I think everyone was scared. I think when I said, "Come on my face, daddy," it had more impact maybe than I thought it would. I mean, to me, it's just kind of a funny line. Give me a line. Give me a fucking line. That's all I'm looking for, is good lines. Eddie came out. Thank you so much. That was amazing. And his remark afterwards was, "I'm a phrase collector," which is true. that's definitely part of it. I feel like phrases, turns of phrase, kind of common phrases are almost like songs. They're like memes. They're viral. They're choruses, and they do kind of explain the thing as good as you could do. You know, like cliches. I'm tired as what you know. What are some turns of some phrases I collected in this poem? Let's see. Um, First order of business, right? Like this is kind of a cliche. This is a phrase. I didn't come up with this. First order of business, but it is poetic. You know, there's a reason why this phrase kind of has stuck and why we use it. It's the most effective way to say that, and so it's just sort of like the thing that you plug in. So like, yeah, in a certain way, I am just like, oh, that's something I noticed. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. First order of business. You know, you hear that all the time. And so I thought, okay, that's a good place. You know, to me, it's not dissimilar from the way that the second generation of the New York school puts like song lyrics or song titles and things into their poems. Like, it's a way of just like, you have this kind of like word material that is poetic and has a music and does serve your purpose. It's a ready-made, right? But it's also a collage of our experience. So the next thing, Dance of the Dream Man. First order of business, Dance of the Dream Man. Dance of the Dream Man is from Twin Peaks. It's the title of the song in the Red Room is Dance of the Dream Man. Or do they call it the Red Room? The Black Lodge is Dance of the Dream Man. So I'm like, that's pertinent to the KGB thing. It's pertinent to a lot of just that energy, you know. It's a way, by collaging these sort of like ready-made phrases, collecting them, cataloging them, you are talking about your own experience. I mean, one of the things, for better or for worse, we talked about at sort of the poetry gathering afterwards was T.S. Eliot had come up, and by way of Apocalypse Now and Marlon Brando, I mentioned how Marlon Brando reads all these T.S. Eliot poems and things in Apocalypse Now, and how that was one of the things that like turned me on to poetry initially. And you know, The Wasteland is basically a collage. It's almost like hyperlinks or something. He's taking all of these kind of source texts and he's referencing all these kind of source texts. And so I don't know. There is something about sort of hyperlinking references that I feel like is at it's part of our experience now, right? Like, the idea with my poems is that you can Google, not any line, but there's probably a lot of things in my poems that you can Google. The lines are meant to be hyperlinks, you know, by clicking, you know, like I have Dance of the Dream Man. By clicking Dance of the Dream Man, if you type that into Google, what might pop up, what I imagine would pop up, would be the Twin Peaks scene, right? So that's sort of what I'm doing with that, right? But I'm referring to my own experience. That's what, you know, our lives are so cluttered with media. One of the prime reasons why I do this, why I put sort of turns of phrase. If you notice, certain filmmakers do it, the Coen brothers do this, where they'll just sort of put things in that people say that are just kind of fun, you know, say it ain't so, or, you know, see you in the funny papers, shit like this. One thing I noticed about, like, my friends or my brother Jack particularly, and if you watch Scenes from a Life, you see this, is a lot of the ways that he communicates is through, like, movie quotes and shit like that. Like, if I go home to Columbus and hang out with my brothers, we might have an entire conversation in movie quotes that, like, there's no original content whatsoever. It's just like we're quoting fucking Dumb and Dumber or Caddyshack or, you know, this sort of common reference that we have of comedy movies or whatever it is, fucking Tommy Boy. And I just thought that was kind of peculiar. Like, you know, they do the voices and everything. That's a T.S. Eliot line. He do the characters in different voices or whatever it is. He do the police in different voices. I don't know why that is pertinent. I mean, to me, it's a way of including the world and taking my own life and putting it into the poem. You know, these experiences these memes, these mental kind of things that wedge their way in, media, films. You know, this poem is called Kingdom Hearts, right? That's sort of a phrase, that's a stolen kind of reference. The idea is that was something that somebody said to me. Somebody said that the open mic reminded them of Kingdom Hearts. So I thought, and they were right, you know? So like, I'm trying to include things that actually happened to me in my life. And to be honest, the title Kingdom Hearts is a great way of talking about my life recently, or life in New York City, or just like, you know, it ties into the Hart Crane reading, it ties into the Empire, you know, there's a lot of resonances, right? There's a lot of vibrations that it has. So it's not all stolen kind of our lives are so full of this kind of media, though. You know, we're force-fed advertisements. We have no choice. You know, we're force-fed. You know, I've been hearing about secession constantly. If you want to engage with life, you're going to hear things. You're going to hear songs you don't want to hear. These things are just part of the common space. They're part of access. They're part of, you know, distribution. They're part of power. And so, you know, you can't avoid these things. To not include them in the poem would feel like a lie. You know, Dance of the Dream Man is something that's very important to me, and sort of defines, rather than saying, oh, you know, we did the open mic at the KGB Red Room again. It's like, I can say Dance of the Dream Man, and it gives it this whole other kind of mysterious kind of quality. You can read a lot into that. Plus, it's just a beautiful poetic phrase. You can go into Angelo Badalamenti from that. You can go into David Lynch from that. You go into the unconscious from that. There's a lot of things that if you click that hyperlink, if you go into that wormhole. So the next line, Dance of the Dream, crying trains away. You know, that's not a ready-made. That's just a line that I came up with. So, you know, it's not entirely a phrase collection. You know, that's a part of what I'm doing. And part of the reason why I'm doing that is because that's part of our experience. Part of our common experience is hearing these phrases. And so, I don't know, that's like a New York school thing, is like kind of having these corny kind of like, you know, I'm trying to think of an example of a book. I can't off the top of my head, but the next line, German style, to get separate checks. That's something that Kuzu Daddy said, right? He told me we went someplace to eat and we got separate checks, or we paid separately, and he's like, oh, German style. He's from Turkey, you know, like, I've never heard that before. I don't know what the fuck that means, if that's true or not. Do German people always get separate checks? Is that some kind of antiquated, you know, racial joke or something? But I also think it, you know, part of what this poem is about, and part of what I'm trying to include, all aspects of experience within the poem. So there's a political and there's a geopolitical aspect. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff in this poem about class and just the structure of our society. I don't like to be overly didactic about that stuff. I like to give the listener a lot of material, like it's like a vision board or a collage, you know? It's like showing them a bunch of pictures, and they can sort of make the connections, or they can sort of figure out their own opinion about, you know, like in this piece I have this reference. Blackstone is a where is it? BlackRock is an asset management firm. Blackstone are venture capitalists. You know, this is not an arbitrary thing. I was over in Midtown walking around, and I ended up smoking a joint and eating in this plaza. I think it was for Blackstone or BlackRock, whichever one was started by Stephen A. Schwartzman. And, you know, these fucking companies have huge amounts of money. I mean, they manage $6 trillion. You know, they're the ones that are buying up all the properties. They're the reason that's driving the wealth inequality. And all they fucking do is they're an asset management firm, meaning they just own shit. Blackstone are venture capitalists, meaning all they do is fucking invest in shit. with they're capitalists, meaning they're the owners. They're the ones who have the capital. We are the labor, if that, you know. And so I'm not going to say that in the poem. I'm not trying to, like, you know, force feed anybody some kind of message or something, but like I also just, you know, the poetry of it being one of them being called Black. I mean, I'm explaining my poetry. My vlog, my live stream should just be called Explaining My Poetry. You know, the poetry of it being Black Rock and Black Stone. Why the fuck are they called, you know, they're both Black Rock. And there was also that that private war profiteering firm during the Iraq, I think they were called BlackRock, weren't they? They made trillions of dollars as well off of death and war and the government and fixing the fucking system and white supremacy and capitalism and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, this is the secession fucking world, you know. Like I didn't watch that much of Secession. I don't want to glamorize wealthy people. The only fucking ending that could have been suitable for me at the end of Secession is if the rabble barged in and cut all their fucking heads off and redistributed the wealth, because to me that show is kind of epitomizing the wealth disparity and the heightening income inequality, which you see all around me. That's why I'm here in the super talls. The super talls are the emblem of personal empire and private wealth. And that's what BlackRock and Blackstone, I mean, that's what New York City is. That's what the 1% is. This is the global aristocracy. They've just reformed, you know, that power structure. And this is not innocuous. You know, the fucking public library on 42nd Street is called the Stephen A. Schwartzman Public Library because that guy made so much goddamn money, you know, doing whatever the fuck he does, not really creating value, I wouldn't say. In fact, probably sucking a lot of value. The problem with our fucking society is that everything is shareholder driven and stock driven, and that's what these fucking companies are. And that's why I'm putting them in my goddamn poem. I'm complaining about it here to explain, you know, I guess my intention. Is there some kind of satanic undercurrent to Black Rock, Black Stone? Is that like the devil's fucking sacrificial altar or something? Like, why are all these evil companies called this? Or Palantir, you know, shit like this. Like, these companies are all around us. This is why the rent is too damn high. This is why New York City went from being a holy city full of crazy poor people and criminals and poets and artists to being a bunch of rich people's kids and, you know, people with who make money off the interest in their bank account. You know, trust fund kids. So, you know, my poem is not entirely just a phrase catalog, you know. That was something that I was noting to myself, right? BlackRock is an asset management firm. Blackstone are venture capitalists. I'm explaining this to myself. I'm self-overhearing. That was something we got into afterwards. We were talking about how Harold Bloom talks about Shakespeare's characters during their soliloquies will say something, and then they'll hear themselves say it, and then they'll think about it, and that will sort of bend the soliloquy into the next movement or whatever, the next volta, the next, you know, 4 bars of the sonnet sort of form, the next crease in the thinking. So, you know, I'm just trying to make basically a movie about my experience and have it be ongoing. I thought Lucas Hall, that dude is super fucking perceptive and sharp, and he had, I thought, kind of an accurate reading, which was like, he was saying that, like, my poem was basically like a Naus Guard, but not boring. You know, I'm cutting out these long-winded, and I'm just giving you the juice. I'm giving you the shortcuts. I'm giving you the sound bites. You know, supposedly we live in this fractured attention span society and era, And so I want my work to reflect that. And that is how my consciousness feels. I don't know about you. Maybe it's just because I'm a pothead and that creates a disjointed kind of disjunctive sense of reality. But I also do want my poetry to jump around a lot, and leaping poetry, right? That was one of the first that was, to be honest, right before I started in Henri Cole's class, I found Leaping Poetry by Robert Bly at Half Price Books, published by the 70s Press or whatever, his press. And the thesis of that book is, poetry is a place where you're leaping around the brain, basically. You're leaping, there's three brains, right? There's the reptile brain, there's the mammal brain, and there's the new brain. The new brain being kind of like the heightened consciousness. And one of the things that poetry can do, or writing, or art, or whatever, or just like everything, is that's situated in different parts of the brain. Like Trump is reptile brain. It's survival brain, it's cold-blooded, it's lizard. When they're talking about lizard people, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about reptile brain, which means you're living in like a reptile, like a fucking crocodile or something. It's kill or be killed, it's, stealthy, it's cold-blooded, it's all of those things. Mammal brain, warm, bears, hairy, think Jerry Garcia, think, just whatever mammals, teats, milk, warm-blooded, cuddly, all of that shit. Us, we're mammals. New brain being sort of a liminal space in the brain that it's harder to access. The new brain is like glowing consciousness, light. When you're shooting light out at everybody, that's when you're living in the new brain. But we have all the brains, and they are kind of all necessary, right? If we didn't have the reptile brain, we'd probably die. There are certain things about it that are important. So maybe jumping through the different brains and harnessing all those different perspectives and types of experience is important. Robert Bly says Lorca is the ultimate poet of leaping poetry. So the idea, it's called leaping poetry because it makes these associative leaps that trigger leaps between the brains and in the consciousness. So, you want to live in the new brain, or at least I do. The idea being that like saints live in the new brain. The idea is like if you're living in the new brain, your consciousness is so high, your brain waves are so whatever enlightened that when they portray halos in art, or the idea of a halo, a light around the head, is meaning you're living in the new brain. Your brain is functioning in sort of like blasting light out, and birds will land on your shoulders and all of that kind of shit. You can talk to animals. You're living in the new brain. But it's hard to stay in the new brain. The saints get shot full of arrows by the reptile people, They're martyrs. They have, all of this. America kills its poets. Brian Wilson spent 3 years in his fucking bedroom, because of Mike Love. Because Mike Love destroys Smile, the greatest fucking lost masterpiece of the 20th century. Because Brian Wilson is clearly a mammal. That's why he's got this beard. He's living in the fucking new brain. He's got this big hair. The Beach Boys are clearly mammal kind of new brain. But anyway, so with the poetry, there is this leaping, like sort of at the base. One of the facilities of poetry, or also that's just an energy thing probably for me. As I have a lot of energy, and I'm always jumping all over the place and blah, blah, blah. So like, leaping poetry makes sense to me. Maybe that's an Irish thing or something. Step dancing, river dance. So leaping around within the poem and touching on as many aspects of experience as you possibly can. Nature, financial asset, that's a big part of why we are forced to live our lives the way we are. Because of BlackRock, because of Blackstone, because these huge financial entities have more and more power, more and more, they drive the prices up. They're making the decisions that set the costs. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, Um, the Nausgard thing was kind of interesting because one of the things I sat through at the Pathetic Happening was this essay that was sort of making fun of Nausgard. It was like a satire about the seventh Nausgard book, and those books were huge. Like, everybody was reading those fucking books 10 years ago. That dude was like the fucking center of, he was the hottest thing in literature, at least in New York. Everybody was raving about these fucking books, which were named after Hitler's fucking book. It's kind of weird that, like, right before the Trump moment, the number one book was, I guess it's not weird, I guess it makes sense, but, like, the number one book was like a 3,500 page, like, book about nothing, essentially, about white male experience. It's the Scandinavian. I mean, you couldn't get any more Aryan than this tall, fucking gorgeous Knausgard guy. I saw him at Brooklyn Book Festival. The auto-fiction moment, I would say, sort of maybe started with that, at least in its current, I mean, that's like, he was taking Proust and really putting it into overdrive. I never read any of it, but it was certainly in the air when I started doing Scenes from a Life, and it was one of the things that definitely I felt like, oh, this will be a good idea that people will like because they love fucking Nausgard. So let me just do Nausgard like on TV. I'll just do Nausgard, but like I'll film it and I'll talk about it and I'll edit it and I don't necessarily know that was like an influence on my poetry. The show was probably more why I started to structure my poetry like a calendar and like a sort of ongoing serialization. Although there were definitely poets that do that, Bill Corbett, the Columbus Square Journal is a poem that Bill Corbett has that's a year long that, is, he lived in Columbus Square in Boston. And it's just sort there's dates in it and it's sort of a Schuyler. Schuyler was the first thing that was ever like mental transcription in the moment that I ever read that I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to do A Few Days or The Morning of the Poem or Hymn to Life. I want to do these long kind of radio transmissions of like my mind thought processes or whatever and share that with people. To me, that I don't know, that is poetry. If you shape it, right? If you pay close attention to it and you work on it, because, you're working all the time as a poet in your head. You're constantly thinking, and that is what we do. We think, And so I wouldn't even necessarily call my writing poetry. It's just sort of a highly cultivated thinking that I write down. That's really in it, but it's shaped by Bernadette Mayer, right? And obviously is a huge influence, and there's a number of sort of calendar kind of New York school things that fed into Scenes from a Life, but more or less with my chapbooks, that's when I started to be like, okay, let me just, the memory piece, maybe when Bernadette Mayer, when I saw the memory piece, and it's sort of structured, right, like she wrote a certain number of pages every day, she took a certain number of pictures every day, and so it sort of had like a time element to it. I started maybe to think about time as a container, whereas in poetry, you're taught to think about time in the form of meter and the form that you're in, sonnet or whatever. For me, now the form is real time, I guess, or sort of aleatory time or consciousness time. And, the whole life experience needs to go into, that's the only way it feels realistic to me. It doesn't feel realistic to cut off, one little aspect of experience and write the poem about my dresser or whatever. That's good too, but now it's just like I want to do it within the transom of, but it was not really I was not trying to ape Nausgard. I mean, if anything, there's plenty of examples of autofiction, Joyce or Proust, Kerouac, obviously. Those were the things that I was more trying to do. I was trying to do Proust by way, but just do it in a poem, really, and do it immediately. Why not do the Proust of this week? Let me just write everything that happened this week and make it literature and make it a poem to the best of my ability, and I'll do that for my whole fucking life, and at the end of my life I'll have, who who knows, 100,000 page long poem or something, you know? The idea is it's just one continuous work and you go all the way through. So to be honest, doing these poetry readings the way I have been doing, where you just read little pieces or whatever, is not really an accurate presentation of the work. This reading I did at Unnameable on Tuesday, to be honest, was the first kind of accurate presentation of what I've been doing, because I just went straight through, I didn't stop, and that's what it's meant to be. But it's not, it's meant to sort of be a novel or like a prose work, but be a poem with line breaks, and, you know, that's important. The line breaks are important. I think that's where Joyce fucked up. I think Ulysses is obviously a poem, and so is Kerouac, for that matter. Kerouac is obviously writing poetry in prose. He's not writing typical fiction bullshit. He's writing a poem. He's writing an oral fucking poem. That's his intention. People are misunderstanding that. But it is a prose poem. It has a wider kind of shape. I think why don't more people write novels in verse or something? Why not put line breaks into something that has a novelistic kind of scope and breadth? You know, that's not antithetical to poetry. I would say the novel is a subgenre of poetry, if anything. They're not opposed. You know, the poem has always been there. You know, the oral poem has been there for thousands and thousands of fucking years. The novel is just a container. It's a new technological medium in a way, essentially. Whereas, so the line breaks are part of the intention, though, and they're part of the beauty, and they're part of the art. You know, I was reading this Allen Ginsberg interview that this guy had posted on Facebook. This guy went to Naropa like in the fucking 70s, so it's like his Facebook post about it. And he was talking about how Allen Ginsberg, he wants to write poetry that is completely works on the page when you look at it, but it also completely works out loud when you read it. That's the goal, is it has to do both. I think that is, you know, what I've been trying to do. And so it can be frustrating when you read things out loud for people not to be able to see it, to see the form of what you're doing, which is part of the intention, or vice versa, you know, to not be able to hear the recitation, to sort of give, you know, it is, with my work especially, it's a performance and it's a script. It's a script for, you know, these are just things that, like, you know, I think as artists, what we need to do is see what our natural tendencies are, what our natural interests, and what we want to do, and find ways to incorporate them into our process. You know, I wanted to write a fucking Proust book. I wanted to write a Kerouac book. I wanted to write about my own experience, but I also wanted to write a long, skinny poem, you know, a la fucking James Schuyler or Eileen Miles, but also I want it to be sort of language poetry, but also I want it to be sort of leaping poetry, but also I sort of want it to be troubadour, you know, folk music or whatever. I want it to have pop music in there. I want it to have the news in there. I want it to have stand-up comedy in there. I want it to be a podcast. I want it to be a movie. I want it to have visual. You know, it has to have everything that is part of our experience and a part of our consciousness, including things outside of our consciousness, you know. Modern day, you know, fucking culture, whatever the stupid pop culture shit is. So, you know, part of doing the form this way is to reflect the current moment. And by collecting these phrases, it's not just because I'm lazy and I'm like, oh, that's a good phrase. You know, although it's that too, it's a word game, and it's like, oh, here, you know, it's a use. You know, I think one of the things that people really must understand about poetry in particular is the words are just as tangible as a block of wood are to, like, a furniture maker. And by taking things out and by shaping it a certain way, it really has a weight and a material. And, like, so, you know, if I hear things out loud and I put them down, it is your work. It is like your um, it has a monetary value in the same way that like a piece of furniture does, because it requires the same. It's still a skill set. Just because it's happening, on a page, there's still a craft here. There's still an embossing happening, and sort of a lace work and ornamentation that's no different than a Fabergé egg or a fucking, making an iPhone. It might not have the same kind of practical use value, supposedly, although I don't think that's true either. I mean, I think one of the prime economic bases of our current economy is thought working. Look at podcasts, look at content, everything that feeds, the driver of our current world, which is social media and, sharing content, is thought labor. It's creative labor. It's being in the think tank. It's, it's art. And so poets getting into the nitty gritty of the language and definition and things, this is like essential labor, and it's physical labor. It's not doing nothing. It's not being lazy. It's not why is it not getting fucking, I wish it was not so blown out back there. These are, I guess, a lot of inside jokes with myself. There's some of that, how outward facing do you have to make it? I don't know. I'm at a certain place with poetry. James said an interesting thing yesterday, just about like a lot of poetry is just like coming to terms with like your place doing it. Like they're even for the people that are really successful, they're not like Brad Pitt or something. They're not that famous. They're not that successful. So even they have to sort of come to terms with their own, like lack of overwhelming success. They're not that culturally powerful or known. And so I think at a certain point with readings, it's like you should kind of just do what you want to do. I don't know. That's where I was on Tuesday. And like I said, I was really proud of myself afterwards. I don't know. I don't think that the audience was like blown away like maybe some of my performances or like the best performances I've ever done or something. But to me, that reading was kind of a breakthrough, and kind of like maybe I hate that I didn't get it on tape. Nobody filmed it. It doesn't exist. It's just gone. It's not audio recorded. It's not video recorded. It's not like I did anything that was magical per se, but like that's what was important to me about it. With every performance I've ever done, I usually get super blazed and like, clown out one way or the other and push the boundaries, break the mic stand, whatever. That kind of stuff is easier for me to do. What's harder for me to do is kind of lay back and try to hold the audience's attention. Let me just do nothing and see how to make that interesting. That's what I was kind of trying to do on Tuesday. It wasn't, I think people thought it was maybe problematic. There were definitely some things in the poem that stuck out. There's like, sexual references that are explicit, that kind of stuff you don't hear typically, and it's sort of, out of favor. It's sort of outre coming from somebody like me. If I just get up there and talk, like, do we need a Nausgard of poetry? I'm about 10 years too late, probably. I mean, and I never read any of the books, so I have no, like, that guy is, like, to me, it was just more the idea of what he did was an influence. I wasn't, like, reading Nausgard and being like, oh, I should do this. It was more just like, oh, this jackoff wrote a 6,000-page book about, and it's popular, So, like, that was just like, okay, I can do that, and I guess people like it because they like it when that guy does it. Or I don't know. It was just like, it was along lines of things that I already wanted to do. I wasn't like trying to take up after. It was already things that I was doing, But, I do think that that's not an inaccurate. That's a pretty, smart way, I guess, to blurb or describe part of what I was doing with this poem, I guess, anyway, is just kind of trying to put my whole experience, or as much, I guess I'm a hoarder. I'm an experience hoarder. I'm just trying to put as much of I can't let things go, I guess. I can't, I'm a nostalgic person. I cry when I, have to say goodbye or leave, and so I want to save everything, I guess. And, there's a lot of great material that happens. Part of it is just, earlier in my life, I was always keeping notebooks, writing down funny things I heard or ideas I had, and yet I was never able to use those ideas in anything, because it's like I had to put them. This is a way of like, I'm trying to use everything. I'm trying to use every idea I have. So by making the form like my life and trying to put as much of my experience and as much of experience as I can, it sort of gives permission to include everything. Like Philip said, nothing is irrelevant. The center is everywhere. The edge is the center. Like no detail is irrelevant. Like that was a thing that I needed to hear before the reading, because that gave me permission. Because a lot of times when I'm reading, I'll think to myself, oh God, why did I write this? Nobody wants to hear this. What this part is, doesn't do anything for the listener. Whereas, I work as hard as I can to make every syllable of my writing have like a carving. Like I want it to be shaped and like it is an etching. It's an encrypted surface, and like I work very hard at that. The look and the encoded kind of messaging and the resonating repetitions of the letters or the recurrences or it is almost like an encryption, the way that there's hidden words within the words, or the rhymes have meanings. The internal rhymes have meanings that you don't even know about, but they feel relevant and they feel like they're relating things in a way that's accurate. So, sharing that, activating that during a reading, you're playing the text almost like a musician. Certain syllables have a certain sound. It's like hitting a wood block or something. You can play that. I didn't want to go overboard with that. I really just wanted to deliver the text. I didn't crank it up until the last page. The last page I thought, all right, I'm almost home free. Let me just do a few little line readings here. So I did some voices and shit to just sort of punch it up at the end. But I don't know. I guess part of including all of experience, I'm not trying to go overboard. Like one of the hallmarks I feel like of confessional writing or auto fiction or whatever is a lot of time it's like about I was bad, or here's my bad habits, here's my like I'm a bad boy or something. Oh my God, like Henry Miller is somebody that like a lot of people recognize as like one of the great writers. I mean, Bob Dylan says Henry Miller is the greatest American writer, but a lot of his stuff, right, is about sex and a lot of writing is about drinking and partying, boozing, drugs. William S. Burroughs, junkie, sort of outlaw, outlandish, illegal, contraband, the sort of unseemly or the seamy side of things, the unseemly aspects of life. And so, but also I think in this moment where we're sort of trying to clean up on toxic masculinity or whatever, clean up the oil spill or the just, environmental emergency that is toxic masculinity, we're rethinking that. We don't want to reward anti-heroes. The drive narratively for a lot of, up until kind of the Trump moment. I mean, Trump being the ultimate anti-hero. I guess that's what happens when you celebrate the anti-heroes. You get fascism, maybe, violence. You're excusing bad behavior, and you're celebrating it. That's the reptile brain, once again, I guess. Bukowski, right, is a model for this sort of like autofiction, skinny poem about his life, having sex, drinking, writing at his typewriter, listening to classical music, you know, enjoying kind of the simple things, smoking a cigarette, the birds. He works at the fucking post office, ham on rye. You know, these were sort of models, you know. Bukowski is probably not a popular influence, or maybe, who knows at this point. He might be the epitome of toxic masculinity, or one of them. He's the poet laureate of toxic masculinity, maybe. But I don't know. There's sort of a I think there's a retribution or redemption. He redeems himself, I think, because his heart or something, right? The beauty. But anyway, he wrote about his life, and he wrote about being working class, and he published from sort of a blue collar. He wasn't an academic. He wasn't an establishment. He wasn't. But part of how he sold books is a lot of dumb people bought them because they were about drinking and screwing and shit like this, you know. Toxic. I'm not trying to overemphasize that stuff. I'm just saying that, like, you know, especially 10 years ago, if you read my poem, Fucking the Muse, where I talk about TV's Hank Moody, my sex book, right? I only recently reissued my sex book because a lot of that stuff I just thought, I can't touch any of this stuff because it's too, I'll get canceled, right? But it's like, you know, you can overdo that stuff, but also, like, I think sex is like a great part of life. Maybe the best. It's beauty. I mean, if you're going to talk about beauty and love and nature and flowers, I mean, how are you not going to talk about sex? To me, that is the human element of those things. Sex is the garden. Sex is the incarnation of all of those things. That poetry is definitely one of the big aspects of poetry. Praise, beauty, light, love poems, yearning, you know, ecstasy. But also, you know, the more subtle kind of interlockings of falling in love and getting to know somebody and all that kind of stuff too. You know, like, I think poetry should be about sex. I think to not have it be about sex, when I say come on my face, daddy, that's beautiful. You know, who thinks that that's dirty or crude? You know, these are the things that I feel like I get crucified for. That's why I didn't, or I don't know, maybe celebrated for. My sex book is probably my most celebrated book. It's the one that people seem to like the best. The writing was, that's back when I actually wrote stuff, before I just was a phrase collector. On the go, I'm an on the go phrase collector. But I don't know, things hit the air, and I do my writing everywhere. I do my writing with people, I do my writing while I'm walking down the street. If a phrase hits the air, or I think of something and it's poetic, boom, that's pre-editing, right? If a line pops into my head, fully formed, that's as good as sitting down to write, and that I know is real, right? It's like the Keats thing, right? Like a poem has to come to you as naturally as flowers on a tree, or whatever the fucking quote is, or else it shouldn't happen at all. I do kind of believe that, to be honest. And, you know, enough phrases come to you that are great lines of poetry in your life, why not just write those down and fuck everything? You know, I don't know, like, there's something to be said for getting down to brass tacks and putting yourself to work and, you know, labor and blood, sweat, and tears and all that shit, or whatever it is, brow sweat, but, like, that's essential too, but, like, I also think poetry happens when you're not trying, and it happens all the time. You trick yourself. Things just hit the air, or, a surprise. You don't even, the voices, things come to you. You feel like, they're visiting you, right? This is, songwriters describe this. I don't know where the song comes from. They just hear it. Paul McCartney heard Yesterday in a Dream, right? And he got up and he thought, what is this? It was fully formed, right? And so poems can come to you at all times. It isn't this thing that's like, well, I sit down from 12 to 4 every day at my desk and I write 100 lines of iambic pentameter. Like, that is a fucking spreadsheet. That is fucking accountant bean counter shit. Like, I want my poem to just, like, burst onto the scene like a belch or a fucking, friend that's coming up over the hill or something. Oh, wow, there you are. I recognize you. And, especially if I haven't heard something before and I feel like it's good, I'm definitely going to write it down. So my process and my work is just a way of figuring out how to use all of that stuff and not throw anything away. And so by virtue of just making this one long poem, the form, I think part of the point of form is to accommodate things that might seem extraneous or like they don't belong. That's part of life too. Life is not just all about the main spine and thread of things. There's a huge scope and cast of characters. There's things out on the periphery that you might only see once. One of the things I love about this poem is how many people it mentions. It really mentions a lot of people from the last few weeks of my experience. So reading for 15 minutes straight and putting them all in one container, in one tapestry or mural or something, is more meaningful, or it has a different effect than if I would have just read one little slice of it that was 2 pages long or something, where you'd only get, now you have this whole kind of, Hieronymus Bosch or whatever kind of, world painting, Red Grooms, where you see, or a Dubuffet, where you see a whole city block, or you see, I want to have the whole city in my poem. I want to have, all the places I go. I want to have Pete's in there. I want to have, of course, the Dance of the Dream Man. I want to have Poetry Project, of course, The Pathetic Happening. The boomers cannibalize us for their atrocity. I just thought that was a dope line. A lot of this poem is hating on boomers, and a lot of it is about the wealth transfer. I mean, that's what Secession, I feel like, is about. I haven't watched it, so I'm totally speaking out of my ass here. But I think one of the reasons why it's so on the pulse is because there is this generational transference that is about to happen and is currently happening that is really unprecedented. The boomers, the wealth that the boomers have is completely unprecedented in history, and the greatest generation, or whoever, the silent generation, and they're dying. And the millennials are the biggest generation ever. The millennials are 30% bigger than Gen Z, because we're the children of the boomers. The boomers had a lot of money, and they took care of their kids, and they spoiled us, and that's why we're snowflakes and shit. Because of the boomers. It's not our fault. Blame our parents once again. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, this is part of the media thing, is like stirring up these generational differences. This is all Trump. Trump just drove a wedge between everybody, and so the cracks just went everywhere. Whatever cracks were there just deepened. Generational gaps, racial gaps, whatever it is, gender, it all just was driven further apart. That was what he was trying to do, is divide people and get between people. And so Secession is all about the old motherfucker dying and who gets the money. Who gets the largest, that's one of the lines in my poem. I heard this, I don't know, on the news or some fucking place, and it felt significant to me. Poetically and, I don't know, situationally. Like, it's the largest generational wealth transference in history. That's crazy. That's what Shakespeare plays are about. That's what Secession is about. Who gets the money? Not me. I'm not getting shit. My parents are poor as fuck. I won't get anything. But I do think one of the prime factors in why certain people have won and certain people have lost is because things have been mandated to us by the people in control, who are the boomers, who are the shareholders, who are the secession people, Murdoch, the 1%, and the mainstream media, the legacy media, the coastal elite, blah, blah, blah. And the jet set, the globetrotters, the private jet people, the people who are killing the planet. They're, that gap has just gotten more and more exaggerated, more and more pronounced. And I haven't watched the session, but in a certain way, it seems like it's just about the very top of the super tall. And that is part of what is unjust about our society right now, and why I feel like I don't need to imagine that or celebrate that. I mean, I don't know what the I got 20% battery left, so I'm going to wrap up pretty soon. I don't know what the status with like inheritance tax is right now, but I think that they got rid of it. I mean, that's one of the prime agenda of Republican presidents for the past 40 years or whatever has just been cutting taxes basically for rich people. That's one, starting wars and cutting taxes for rich people. That's basically all they do. Outlawing abortion, starting wars, cutting taxes for rich people. So I'm sure that they got rid of the inheritance tax. So that money is not going to go into the government. That money's not going to go into social services. It's not going to go into helping people. It's not going to go into Medicaid. It's not going to go into the big wasteful government. It's going to go to trust fund kids and twerps and little snot-nosed punks who are all around us in fucking Manhattan. And that's what secession is about. So fuck those people. I mean, you can't live in Manhattan right now or New York City right now and not think about this stuff or write about this stuff because it's so in your face. Nobody talks about class hardly at all. Everybody talks about race and gender and all of these things, including the avant-garde and the left extremists. But class is really what is driving the fucking misery right now, and wealth inequality. And I mean, it's just in your face. I mean, so that's part of my fucking poem, going to fucking these open mics and shit. I mean, trying to find a place to live in New York. This is why I'm staying in Midwood. It's $1,200 for a room anywhere because everybody's parents are paying for their shit because they own all the fucking wealth. Another aspect of this poem, I have the line about the value for homeowners of their property has increased 500% since 1983. That's probably around the time boomers bought property, right? So, if you bought a house for $100,000 in 1983, it's now worth $500,000 or whatever. This is not what it's like for millennials. This is a prime reason why we're suffering. This is the Hamlet of our generation. So, I am the character. This is my soliloquy. These are the facts. This is what I'm saying. This is what I'm presenting to you. This is why I'm broke and a joke and not famous. Nobody gives a shit about me. Everybody thinks my poetry is like misogynistic or hateful or creepy. I don't even know what. I don't even know what they think. They think I'm angry. They think I'm scary. They think I'm gross. They think I'm old-fashioned. I don't know. I guess I am I did get a little bit too enamored with sort of the antisocial sort of poet Maudette figure, like a Baudelaire. There's a lot of antisocial, fucking Rimbaud. Rimbaud didn't exactly, he wasn't a hit with the Paris literary circles either. He went and I think he was a little bit of a sensation, but he turned the tables on those motherfuckers, right? He was a tantrum-throwing little enfant terrible. And I don't know. Maybe those type of things have been a little too... Rene Ricard, right? Another example of sort of mean. It's not good to be mean. I don't want to be mean. I want to be nice. I do want people to like me. I want them to like my poetry. I do the best I can. Is there anything else I want to talk about with this? I mean, I do have to sign off because my battery's dying. I thought it was a good sesh. I mean, there was a lot of things in here that, you know, if this was 4 or 5 years ago, I just wouldn't have said because they were too personal. They may have gotten me into trouble or something. But I'm at a point where I'm just like, who? I think that's probably a better place for me to be. You know, it's hard for me to try to fit into these institutional settings. To be honest, I just think I would probably be a lot happier just free. And just like going to open mics, booking my own stuff, traveling, you know, going to cities all over the place and just reading what the fuck I want to read and not being afraid. You know, not being afraid, oh my God, are people in New York going to reject me because I'm not, if I say the wrong thing, or, you know, if I say something offensive, or if I say come on my face daddy, people are going to think it's pornographic, or I'm a creepy old fuck or something. To be honest, I met Ashley before anybody, okay? I met Ashley before any of these people, and it was all her idea. She's not nearly as innocent as she looks. She's not innocent at all. She's not innocent. I mean, Ashley's a great person, you know. I love Ashley, but she's not as innocent as she looks. And it's all her idea. It's all her fucking idea, not me. That's not a bad thing, but I'm sure to people on the outside it looks like I'm some creepy old fuck who's just like trying to get ahead or something, which is not the case. Like I said, I met Ashley before anybody. I have the first time I saw her on video at KGB Bar because her poem I just like immediately connected with, right? We had an immediate connection. I didn't meet her through any kind of official channels at all. I meet her the same way I meet everybody at open mic nights. The way God intended, before everything got bought up by the fucking boomers and institutionalized, and they started denying us access, and they just started putting Taylor Swift propaganda everywhere. You know, I love Taylor Swift, but like, you can see how much power institutionally Swifties have. Because, look, they gave Taylor a fucking honorary doctorate. Not that she shouldn't have it, but the reason she got it is because all these fucking people at NYU are hardcore Swifties. Swifty's dad is a venture capitalist, okay? They're the enemy. They're just like the fucking secession people. She's been famous since she was like 12. It's weird. But that's not to say she's not a genius. Or what, you know, she's great. She's great at what she does. The worldwide brand that the legions of Swifties have created is strong and powerful. But anyway, here I am, a bottom feeder, scraping along, just trying to get the message out to as many people. My message of extreme poverty, it's just too Catholic. Maybe it is all about fully automated luxury communism. And I need to get rid of my kind of Artaud theater of cruelty, like insistence on masochistic poverty. I don't know. I dislike wealth inequality and rich people and their supposed assignations of value so much that I do want my work to be emphatically poor, and just you know, to just show that you can do it anyway, and fuck their technique. You know, technique is another thing that has been bought. You know, I didn't get to go to fucking Columbia or NYU or fucking Bard summer writing camp when I was in fucking high school, okay? My parents could not pay for any of that shit. Technique is classist. Getting lessons costs money, okay? So I'm anti-technique. I learned my technique in bookstores. And I'll end on this. My as I've been increasingly jaded and disillusioned with the poetry world and po-biz and all the stars of poetry and all my heroes, frankly, who all hate my guts, the entire New York school thinks I'm a fucking creep. But I love the New York school. And I'm in the New York school. I am the fucking New York school. At this point, I am the New York school. The next generation. Degrassi, the next generation. We are taking it. It's ours. We are the fucking New York school, okay? We're squatting. We're occupying. We're hijacking the New York school. It's ours now. Nobody else gives a fuck about it. And I'm the only person who really tries to write that way, really, very much. I'm certainly the master. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, of course. I'm trying to blend New York school. Well, as I became disillusioned with my experience here, more aware of other things, San Francisco Renaissance, Wayland, LA poets, other things that were happening, language poetry, objectivists, etc., trying to blend all of the strains. That was all just shit that even the fucking poetry project put me on the wait list. For fucking Eddie's workshop. I was on the goddamn wait list. They weren't even going to let me into the workshop. I've been doing video work there for 5 years, way under what I should be paid. And they put me on the fucking wait list. That's everything you need to know about, like, the elite institutional, like, Devil Wears Prada intern culture, which is another kind of aristocracy and class system. You have to be rich to even get into that. To be an unpaid intern, you have to be rich, as everybody knows. But I've tried to draw my inspiration directly from life and what's around me. My friends, things people say, walking around just staring into the air, rather than books. I don't read nearly as much as I did. And I certainly don't worship these cocksuckers like I did. Pardon my French. I don't mean to offend anybody. But I think there's something to be said for that. I think it's like studying chess too much. You don't want to be obsessed with chess and reading chess books all day. You want to go fishing. You want to live your life. You want to go out in the world. You want to talk to your friends, hang out with your friends, hang out in the park, just chill, have a great time. That stuff, you need that stuff to feed your work. You need experience. You need energy. Those little interactions with people, things you hear from people, they inspire you, things you witness, things you collide with. That's the juice. That's the marrow. That's the sap. That is the content, right? So you need to collect things. You need to go out and have experiences and feel things and go through, catharsis and emotional kind of like bridge work and journeying and shit. And so, like Whitman, right? My libraries are out of doors. Or no, that's what they said about Wordsworth. His study is inside, but his library, or what is it? I don't remember, is out of doors. Meaning, he has his books and shit inside, but his work happens outside, wandering through the forest, which is what I'm about to do here in the Ramble, here in Central Park. That's what Whitman said too, right? He didn't learn anything in rooms. Song of the Open Road. It was when he left the rooms. That's all well and good, study indoors. It's summertime now. And, also just like the pandemic, all of that, it was more about drawing things from the air, drawing from what was actually around us, seeing what was actually going on, going out, looking around, trying to tell the story of what's actually around us rather than reading books that are 50 fucking years old. And I don't know. Mostly I scan poetry for technique anyway. I don't even really read. I haven't read in a long time. Pot kind of destroys your ability to follow any kind of narrative through line. So I either like listen to poetry readings in person, IRL. I don't listen to poetry readings online anymore. I can't, I don't know why. I'd rather listen to Grateful Dead concerts and Bob Dylan concerts. Maybe that's what drugs do to you, I suppose. But in a way, I just want I wanted my long poem to be a Grateful Dead concert or a Bob Dylan concert. You know, I do think that like Keats' long poems, they're sound pieces. They're like durational ambient sound works. You do not have, you can dig into every little thing and get all the meaning out of it, but you can also just sit there and let it pass and let it wash over to you and listen to it over and over again like a fucking play or a movie or something. One of the best things I think you could do is watch a movie over and over and over again. You see things that you didn't realize that you missed. It's amazing how much of our experience we miss. Okay, I've only got 10% battery left. It's amazing how much of our experience we miss. And by repeating things, we can get the things that we missed the first time. And so with my long poems, that's what I'm trying to do. You know, you might only hear about 30 to 60% of it, and it's just meant to sort of pass in front of you, like music. But then you listen to it again, you hear something else. You know, and you listen to it again, you hear something else. You hear something different every time, you know. And so, I don't know. People ask me what I'm reading. I don't read as much as I did. I don't know. I cull the text for ideas about how I can do it. Unless something really turns me on, you know. You know, there are definitely books that, like, if I pick up, I'm going to be like, yeah, I need this. But a lot of poetry I find very bland and numb. Or like it's numb to me. It doesn't actually offer me any kind of charge. It's just kind of like some gripe. It's like some like tranquilized like complaint or it's very tranquilized. I feel like all modern poetry feels very tranquilized to me. And I'm going to leave it on that. I don't want to be fucking tranquilized. I'm not on antidepressants. I smoke weed because I don't do it because it makes me crazy, but people think I'm crazy. That's because they're all on antidepressants. So start dabbing. You know, I'm going to do a recitation of the long poem because I'm going to type it out. I think it'll be the centerpiece of my next book. Kingdom Hearts. You know, it's a catalog. It's a phrase catalog and so much more. Thank you for watching. We're back Monday. It's Pride Month at Easy Paradise. Come out Monday. Sign up now. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.